In the quiet tranquility of Jetavana, the Buddha sat beneath a sprawling Bodhi tree, surrounded by attentive disciples. A young disciple, Ananda, approached with furrowed brows, his inner turmoil evident in his hesitant steps towards the enlightened one. "Master," Ananda began, his voice a whisper, "emotions overwhelm me like waves. How can I maintain balance in their midst?" The Buddha smiled gently, gesturing for Ananda to sit beside him on the soft grass of the grove. "Ananda," the Buddha said, his tone calm, "the mind is like a river, constantly flowing with thoughts and emotions." One of the older disciples, a potter by trade, raised his hand and bowed deeply to the Buddha. "Master," he began, his voice wavering with the weight of years, "how does one approach aging without suffering? I seek your wisdom." A fisherman once stood at this riverbank, the Buddha narrated, hoping to catch fish for his family's meal. Despite his efforts, the Buddha added, his net returned empty, and frustration soon consumed his thoughts and actions. He yelled at the waters, blaming the river, and threw stones into the currents in futile anger. The Buddha continued, "The river, unaffected by his fury, flowed on, unbothered by his outbursts, continuing its journey to the distant ocean." "Ananda," the Buddha said, turning towards his disciple, "what do you think happened to the fisherman consumed by his emotions?" Ananda pondered before answering, "Master, his anger must have clouded his judgment, leaving him tired and perhaps with no fish." The Buddha nodded, his eyes full of compassion. "Indeed, his anger brought him neither fish nor peace, only needless suffering. Now consider," the Buddha said, "the river itself. It neither resists nor clings to anything within its current. Whether the river carries leaves, stones, or fish, it remains unchanged, flowing steadily onward without attachment." He added, "Emotions are like the currents of that river, impermanent by nature, meant to flow freely without grasping or resistance. If you block the flow of a river, what happens?" the Buddha asked, his gaze steady on Ananda. "The water stagnates, becoming murky and foul," Ananda replied, his understanding beginning to deepen with the Buddha's analogy. "Correct," the Buddha said. "Likewise, suppressing emotions or clinging to them leads to mental and emotional stagnation. Observe emotions as they arise," the Buddha instructed, "but do not identify with them or let them dictate your actions." "Master, how can one practice such awareness amid powerful emotions?" Ananda asked, his voice filled with earnest curiosity. "Mindfulness," the Buddha replied, "is the tool to observe your emotions like a riverbank watches its flowing currents. By observing your emotions," the Buddha explained, "you create a space between feeling and reaction, allowing clarity to arise. See the sparrow, untroubled by age or time. It acts within its moment, free from fear of tomorrow." Ananda's face brightened with understanding. "Master, does this mean I must remain detached from my emotions entirely?" "No," the Buddha replied gently. "Detachment does not mean indifference. It means freedom from being controlled by emotions. Experience your emotions fully," the Buddha advised, "but let them pass like clouds drifting across the vast sky." To resist emotions, the Buddha said, is like trying to push away clouds. It only brings unnecessary struggle. Emotional agility arises from observing, accepting, and letting go, all while staying grounded in your true nature, he continued. Ananda sat quietly, absorbing the profound teachings of the Buddha with gratitude blossoming in his heart like a lotus. "Master," he said after a pause, "how can I practice this mindfulness in daily life beyond moments of sitting meditation?" "Ananda," the Buddha said with a warm smile, "life itself is your practice. Every moment offers opportunities to be mindful. When you walk," the Buddha explained, "be aware of your steps. When you eat, savor each bite with full attention. Even in conversation, the Buddha added, be present with the words spoken and the emotions felt, without distraction. Buddha smiled, his presence radiating warmth and encouragement, like sunlight breaking through dense clouds of ignorance. The disciples, inspired, murmured their commitment to embodying Buddha's teachings in their own lives deeply. With these words, the Buddha closed his eyes, entering silent meditation, his serenity inspiring all who sat near him. The disciples, including Ananda, sat in stillness, their hearts touched by the simplicity and depth of the Buddha's wisdom. In the quiet presence of the Enlightened One, the flowing river seemed to mirror the unending journey of human emotions. Another day, another lesson in the peaceful grove of Jetavana. The Buddha sat among his disciples, serene and present. A merchant in the crowd raised his hand, his voice heavy with concern as he addressed the Enlightened One. Master, the merchant said, my heart wrestles with anger and fear. How can I stand firm without succumbing to their weight? The Buddha, with a calm gaze, gestured towards the ancient trees surrounding them, their branches swaying with the gentle breeze. Observe the trees, the Buddha began. How they bend under the weight of the wind yet remain deeply rooted in the earth. They do not resist the wind, he continued. Nor do they break. They find strength in their flexibility and grounding. There was once a villager, the Buddha narrated, who lived at the edge of a dense forest, fearful of its hidden dangers. One stormy night, the Buddha said, the wind howled fiercely, shaking the villager's humble home, which quivered under nature's force. The villager, consumed by fear, locked his doors and windows. Trembling with each thunderclap and flash of lightning, he cursed the storm, seeking to block out its presence entirely. Yet his fear only grew, suffocating his spirit. When the tempest subsided, the villager ventured out and saw the trees, tall and resilient, swaying in the aftermath. The storm had passed, but the villager remained shaken, burdened by the weight of his resistance to its power. Resistance arises from fear, the Buddha explained, a fear of what emotions may reveal about ourselves and our vulnerabilities. Emotions, however, the Buddha said, are not enemies. They are teachers, offering lessons that strengthen and expand our understanding. This man has embraced the art of pause. In silence, he has found harmony with the flow of life, Buddha said. Master, the merchant asked, how can one learn to accept such turbulent emotions without being overwhelmed by their intensity? By cultivating mindfulness and self-awareness, the Buddha replied. You begin to see emotions not as threats but as passing phenomena. When anger arises, the Buddha continued, pause and examine it with curiosity, asking, what does this anger teach me about myself? When fear appears, the Buddha said, approach it as you would a shadow, realizing it cannot exist without light. Emotions are like the wind, the Buddha explained, invisible yet felt, powerful yet impermanent, shaping the world without being seen. Resistance hardens the heart, the Buddha cautioned, but acceptance opens it, creating space for wisdom and compassion to flourish. The merchant listened intently, his brows furrowed as he absorbed the Buddha's words, seeking clarity in their profound simplicity. Master, the merchant said hesitantly, is it possible to turn even the strongest emotions into a source of strength and insight? Yes, the Buddha answered, his voice steady and kind. By embracing emotions as they are, you transform suffering into understanding. The Buddha shared another story, this time of a young woman who lived near a lake, plagued by deep sorrow. Every morning, the Buddha narrated, the woman would visit the lake, her tears mingling with its waters as she mourned her loss. One day, he continued, a traveling monk paused by the lake, observing the woman's grief as he silently meditated nearby. The monk approached her gently and said, the lake reflects your sorrow, but its waters remain still and clear. Your mind is like this lake, the monk said, capable of holding emotion without being consumed by its depths. The woman began to meditate at the lake, the Buddha said, learning to hold her sorrow with compassion and mindfulness. Over time, the Buddha concluded, her grief transformed into strength, as she saw her pain as part of life's flow. Master, the merchant said with renewed hope, I see now that emotions can guide us if we approach them with wisdom. Indeed, the Buddha replied, to resist emotions is to resist life itself. To accept them is to embrace your humanity. Balance lies not in avoiding storms, the Buddha said, but in learning to bend like the trees and reflect like the lake. The merchant bowed deeply, his heart lighter. As the teachings of the Buddha resonated deeply within his being, the other disciples, inspired by the exchange, sat in quiet meditation, their thoughts turning to their own struggles and emotions. The Buddha's words lingered in the air, a reminder that even the strongest winds cannot uproot a tree firmly rooted in wisdom. Another day, another moment in the garden of Jetavana. The Buddha walked among blooming flowers, his presence calming the space. A farmer approached him, carrying the weariness of endless toil on his shoulders, his face lined with deep worry and fatigue. Master, the farmer said, his voice trembling, how can I find peace when life is chaos and balance feels impossible? The Buddha stopped by a lotus pond, gesturing towards the serene water reflecting the vibrant colors of the surrounding blooms. Do you see the pond? The Buddha asked. Its water holds the reflections without clinging, remaining clear even amidst life's beauty and debris. The farmer nodded slowly, unsure of the connection, yet willing to listen to the wisdom emanating from the enlightened one. There was a prince, the Buddha began, who sought vengeance after losing his kingdom. Consumed by rage and sorrow, day and night the Buddha continued. The prince's mind was torn between hatred for his enemies and sorrow for his people. One day, the Buddha said, he encountered a wandering monk meditating under a tree, calm and unshaken by the world's turmoil. The monk saw the prince's suffering, the Buddha narrated, and invited him to sit, asking him to observe his emotions. The prince hesitated but complied, closing his eyes and feeling the storm of rage and sorrow within his heart. The monk said gently, see your emotions as passing guests. Acknowledge their presence but do not let them rule your home. Over time, the Buddha added, the prince learned to meditate, neither clinging to his hatred nor drowning in his sorrow. Eventually, his heart grew lighter, the Buddha continued, and he regained his kingdom not through war, but wise leadership. The farmer listened intently, his eyes fixed on the lotus pond that seemed to mirror the Buddha's peaceful wisdom. Master, the farmer asked, how can I find balance when life's demands leave me no time for reflection or peace? Balance, the Buddha replied, is not the absence of chaos, but the presence of mindfulness within the chaos. Consider this garden, the Buddha said. Its flowers grow in harmony, each nourished by the balance of sun and rain. The gardener tends to the weeds, the Buddha added, ensuring the balance is preserved, so the flowers can flourish together. Your mind is like a garden, the Buddha explained, requiring care, balance, and attention to thrive amidst life's storms. When emotions overwhelm, the Buddha said, pause and breathe, observing them as passing clouds in the vast sky of awareness. The farmer nodded, his shoulders beginning to relax as the wisdom of the Buddha resonated deeply within his being. Master, the farmer asked, is mindfulness enough to cultivate balance? Or must one take further steps in life's chaos? Mindfulness is the foundation, the Buddha replied, but actions born of clarity and compassion are essential to preserving inner balance, even amidst life's chaos. The Buddha said, choose actions that align with your values, ensuring harmony within your heart. Do not seek balance by avoiding life's challenges, the Buddha added, But by facing them with wisdom and compassion, the farmer lowered his gaze. Reflecting on his own life, realizing his endless toil lacked mindfulness and compassionate intention. "Master," the farmer said softly, "how can I find strength to act wisely when my heart feels burdened with endless struggles?" "Strength arises from understanding your struggles," the Buddha replied, "not resisting them, but seeing them as lessons for growth. There was a woman," the Buddha began again, "who carried water each day, her heart heavy with unspoken grief and exhaustion. Her burden seemed unbearable," the Buddha said, "until one day a monk shared a simple but profound insight by the river. The monk said, 'Observe the water you carry. It nourishes life, yet it flows freely without attachment to its purpose.' The woman paused and listened, realizing her struggles served a purpose. Yet she did not need to cling to her suffering. She began to carry the water mindfully," the Buddha added, transforming her burden into a practice of peace and awareness. "Your struggles, too," the Buddha said, "can transform into sources of growth when approached with mindfulness and compassionate intention." The farmer bowed deeply, his heart lighter, as the Buddha's teachings illuminated a new perspective on life's challenges. Around them, disciples sat in quiet reflection, each contemplating their own paths to balance amidst life's joys and sorrows. The garden bloomed with harmony, a reminder that life's balance is cultivated through mindfulness, understanding, and compassionate action. The disciples listened intently, imagining the intensity of the king's anger and the consequences that followed his impulsive decision clearly. In his fury, the king harmed an innocent man, but regret soon consumed him, leaving his leadership weakened and fractured. Buddha concluded, "Thank you for watching. Buddha's teachings are always with you." Subscribe to our channel and we will see you in the next video.